Research by Oxford University shows that there are no people who excel in strategic ingenuity and operational excellence and in the ability to build relationships. The comparison with the duck inevitably comes to mind. A duck can fly, swim, and walk, but excels at nothing. The leader does not exist. The leader cannot do it alone. And that brings us to output-driven leadership. Steve Jobs said, "There is no point in hiring smart people and then telling them what to do. We hire smart people so that they can tell us what to do." This statement by Steve Jobs leans heavily towards the principle of output-driven work and autonomous teams. In previous models, we saw that remote employees must have competencies such as autonomy and independence. The time when you are considered quote unquote good because you are present in the office for 10 hours a day is over. From that autonomy, too many make the automatic translation into letting go of everyone and delegating remotely. There's a great misunderstanding here. Nothing is less true. Once you have unraveled the cryptogram in your workbook, this statement will no longer come as a shock to you. Results-oriented work does not mean automatically letting go and or trusting everyone. On the contrary, we need to keep everyone together, including the experts who can work perfectly independently and autonomously. You cannot afford to assume that everything is going well, trust 100%, only to discover that there are gaps. Working remotely leads to several paradoxes, such as employees consider the freedom they have gained an improvement. No one is watching me. But on the other hand, nobody sees what you do all the day. And you therefore get less recognition and appreciation. But we also notice a paradox among managers. On the one hand, they lack insight into who does what and can monitor less, but at the same time, they indicate that they find it annoying that they cannot always be there for their team when they need them. Working remotely also has an impact on how managers interpret their relationship. From a manager-driven team where employees are responsible for the execution of tasks to a self-managing autonomous team where employees themselves give direction, shape the team, manage their work, and execute the tasks. During the LEAD conference in London in 2019, Rebecca Hill showed this slide that sums it up nicely. This means that your role shifts from being the manager who manages the operational work to the leader who leads the team and who takes time to coach and develop people into a better version of themselves. Working remotely makes values such as commitment important. People have to take responsibility because there is no one behind them to control their work. But for employees to take responsibility, you have to give them room. On the other hand, you must also have the technology to monitor performance and efficiency. Follow-up remains important anyway, not only in the current situation, but in every context where responsibility and freedom are given. It is important as a manager to clearly define the playing field. Your people need to know it's okay for them to stop at 4 p.m. to deal with the children and to work for a few hours, for instance, at 7 p.m. Expectations must be very clear, especially at a distance. So we need to keep everyone together in a remote working environment. Keeping it together is best done in consultation. So together with each other, co-creatively, openly and transparently. Now I propose that with two axes where each has a responsibility. The employee is responsible for making sure things are done right. The manager is responsible for making sure we do the right things, which leads to a combination between effectiveness and efficiency, the ultimate fusion. As an employee, you don't benefit from a micromanager. But equally, an absent manager is not a gift either. It gives too much of a feeling that your manager doesn't care about you, that you can't count on him, and that you have to do it alone. These two axes also indicate four positions. And if we go through them, we lay the foundation for result-oriented work or working on output, on performance. I use here a methodology from agile working, namely the plan, do, check, and act, where we also look for efficiency and effectiveness improvements. The Plan, Do, Check, Act, or the Deming Circle, was first applied in production environments. If you want to produce 100 cars, it makes no sense for a leader to stand at the end of the line and check all the cars and then find out that 4 cars, for instance, roll off the line without windscreen wipers. The damage is done. You lose resources, time and money, and you create frustration among the employees. Agile means that you achieve your results in a quote unquote lean way. So you have to put yourself at the beginning and especially plan very well what employees need to achieve, the result that they need to achieve in an autonomous way. So that we can reward them for the result. So leading them to success and not to failure. Since a remote leader does not have the opportunity to put himself next to the employee at the end of the line to control everything, we can use this methodology very well to find the balance between managing and delegating. From a distance, a leader should focus on the first position, the plan position. The better this is supervised, implemented, built up, and worked out, the less adjustment will be needed afterwards. The more you thoroughly address all the elements of this first position, the more strategic you become in your role and the more you delegate management to the employee. The less you have to take on the role, the less pressure there is on you. Strategy means that you mainly focus on the why and the what, but that you leave the how to the employees. Now let's see what you have to do then. Before you let someone work autonomously, you must first articulate a vision. A vision is an image, an ideal state, an aspiration expressed in words or in a visual. It is something you want to realize together. The vision, the dream of the future has to be clear and everyone has to know it, feel it and propagate it. Above all, a vision should invite, arouse enthusiasm, gives us all a certain drive and motivation. It's a kind of Red Bull effect. Now, in leadership coaching, I sometimes give the example to make my coachee feel the importance of vision. Suppose you go to a travel agency without a vision or an image of your ideal holiday and ask, book me a holiday. I've been working hard and I need relaxation. The chances are that the travel agent will offer you a trip that does not meet your expectations. The destination, the details, the budget, and the period are anything but your ideal. The agency makes a very good profit, but you are very disappointed. Some leaders, when I ask them what the vision of their team is, answer me with the vision of the company, the mission statement. Now, that is certainly the starting position because the vision of your team needs to be, of course, in line with the vision of the company. The problem is that for many people, this is woolly language, so very vague. the far cry from their bed show, to use an expression. So they don't connect with it. They stand too far from it. Now, what is your view of the future? How will you organize things so that together you can achieve the mission? Your vision must be known and lived by each employee. Your vision sets the tone for the business strategies that will be implemented to achieve the objectives. Your vision tells you how you will work to achieve your mission. Pause the video for a moment and work through the questions in your workbook that will help you formulate a vision for your team. These questions will help you find out what your team's vision is. What are our raisons d'être? So why do we live? Our reasons for living. What do we stand for? What is our motto? What gives us energy? What do we definitely want to spend time or energy on? Where do we see ourselves tomorrow and beyond? What do we want others, like customers and colleagues, to say about us? What do we still want to do and why? Just to give you a couple of examples. Lisa Earle McLeod, a sales strategist and author of the book Selling with Noble Purpose, shares on Harvard Business Review the 3 most common mistakes that get in the way of the effectiveness of your purpose efforts. A first one is a lack of clear metrics. An organization, they need a matrix, they need measurements for production goals, sales revenue, customer satisfaction, and other indicators. Purpose requires a similar focus, is something that Lisa will share with us in her article. Those who take purpose seriously add qualitative indicators to measure progress, rather than relying solely on traditional quantitative measurements such as sales and profits. Mars Pet Care's purpose, for example, is to create a better world for pets. The company makes a habit of tracking the health, nutrition, and the homelessness of pets to assess strategic progress against the purpose. Other ways to measure progress against the purpose includes the number of warm referrals, the number of new customers, for instance, and direct customer feedback. Only once you have a metric or a measurement, even if it is an imperfect indicator, you are in daily contact with the purpose of the organization. Secondly, not connecting purpose and sales. When the pressure increases to achieve sales targets, the purpose often falls by the wayside. A costly and unnecessary mistake. Activating a purpose in sales can have the most immediate financial benefit. Research from Michigan State University, for example, shows that salespeople with a sense of purpose beyond money put in more effort and are more adaptable over time than salespeople who focus solely on internal goals and quotas. To land a purpose in a sales team, leaders need to make achieving the organizational goal as clear as financial goals. You can emphasize purpose in sales meetings and talk about how the organization makes a real difference to customers. Another suggestion, tell how many customers salespeople have helped instead of just the number of deals they have won. The simple rephrasing puts a different spin on the story. It makes it clear to the sales team. If we live up to our purpose, we will meet our sales targets. Thirdly, miss the opportunity to activate purpose in your employees. It is tempting to see purpose as a communication tool with the outside world and then assume that it will find its way inside the organization. But it requires more from leaders to activate the higher purpose in the hearts and the minds of their people. For example, Ernst & Young has embedded its purpose, building a better working world, in the daily work of every individual in the organization. For example, an auditor can look at his daily task and see how each of them improves the working world. Ask your people, how does our work make a difference? How do we have a positive impact on our customers, our team, and our community? What role do you play in helping us achieve our goal? By asking people about their own connection to the company's purpose rather than telling them, purpose changes from corporate mantra to personal property. This creates a mental connection to the higher purpose of the organization, which your team members can use to reset themselves in times of change and uncertainty. Once a company has announced a certain vision or policy, it invites the employees to start behaving accordingly. Dropbox announced the following vision in October 2020 in full corona. Several technology companies have already announced policy changes regarding remote working. Now, Dropbox's plans go a step further and have far-reaching consequences for the offices of the software company. Dropbox's offices will no longer serve as daily workplaces, but will be transformed into meeting spaces for social and team gatherings or team build-ups. They are called Dropbox Studios. All employees now work from home. The turnaround is great when you consider that before the lockdown, only 3% worked remotely. By the way, in 2017, Dropbox had opened another headquarters in San Francisco with 70,000 square feet of office space. This vision has changed. The new direction is a cultural landslide for the company with just under 3,000 employees. Dropbox wants to develop better and different habits about when and how employees meet. A whole day of video calls is too tiring. Leaders decide how often their teams meet. You can watch the video of the CEO of Dropbox. I've listed the URL on the slide. A clear company culture in which employees feel involved and live this culture to the full, the mission and vision of the company is known and shared, is an important step in binding a remote employee to the organization. You don't achieve sustainable behavioral change by only putting the company values on the website, especially at a distance. Without a supported corporate culture, work can be done anywhere in the world. Your workplace is no longer about the physical place where your work or where you go to, but more about the culture that the company creates. Working on the same project remotely at different times therefore shows more than ever how important that company culture has become. Remember, culture always defeats strategy. You can put a fantastic strategy on paper, but if the company culture is not present to achieve this strategy, it will remain an ideal dream on paper, and you will run a high risk of it not being achieved. So as a leader, ask yourself if you have done your utmost to really get to know the organizational culture, to really understand it down to the smallest detail. As a leader, you need to know and be able to read the organizational culture at the deepest level. Behavioral change remains difficult when we do not thoroughly embed new insights. Through distance and changing workspaces, the employee sees and experiences a daily change that ultimately leads to new culture. The corona crisis is a good test of corporate culture for every company and its employees. How did the company respond to the changing circumstances? Was every leader and employee immediately on board with the new reality? If not, how can we stimulate and guide our people? After all, adaptability is not a one-sided process, and an employee's potential only comes into its own in a company culture that allows for it. If the company culture is not attuned to working remotely, or one does not behave accordingly, not walk the talk, because the management is, for example, insufficiently prepared to let go of control and to follow the decisions taken by the self-managing teams, such a team cannot possibly work and you re-up frustration. To avoid isolation, the corporate culture should recognize and value team members individually. People must feel good, involved, and committed. It's not about perks, it's about inclusiveness. To activate your culture, don't expect employees to just pick up on your values, let alone integrate them. Evaluate whether your company culture is just a set of perks or whether it is authentically represents your DNA, your core, your personality, and your company. Enable your people to experience firsthand how you formulate and develop goals, and do this together. Co-creation ensures that you grow towards each other, that they get a better sense of you and you of them. Be careful with your own assumptions or beliefs. No longer can you be leading by walking around. Identify new and unique ways to embody your culture. It is crucial to use technical tools as a guide to creating spaces for people-to-people connection. We'll come back to this in subsequent videos. Structures are now being built with chat channels and online events for personal and work-related topics. For example, if one of your core values has to do with learning and curiosity, plan a roundtable discussion for team members to discuss, for instance, an interesting article. If you value innovation, hold a virtual expo where each employee presents a creative product idea, for instance. So develop a buddy system where employees regularly schedule a virtual coffee or lunch with a random member of the team. This way you create these informal connections between team members, which leads to more trust and well-being. Question your virtual culture once a year and preferably twice a year. Culture is dynamic and constantly evolving. Pay attention to team feedback. If you see signs of misalignment, isolation, or disengagement, address them immediately. Don't change people, fix culture. Create an inclusive environment where people feel at home and they need to belong. The sum of your people's behavior forms the company culture. If employers focus too much on results, there is a danger that ethics will slowly disappear from the picture. Employees' ingrained morality can come under pressure when the focus is solely on productivity, efficiency, and speed, certainly at a distance. In such a situation, some employees put themselves under increased performance pressure and make choices that they otherwise would not have made. So don't forget to emphasize values and ethics. Good leaders, quote unquote, are aware of this and constantly ask the right questions, even in economically difficult times. It is possible and it is allowed, but do we have to want it? In your workbook, you can make an overview of the values and who has an exemplary role in this or still needs to grow. Another obstacle that plays a role in these times of remote working when it comes to ethics and integrity is the lack of exemplary behavior. Leading by example. Good leaders set the right example and know how to motivate their employees in the right way. But it is precisely this visibility that is currently lacking. Employees hardly ever see or hear their leader in action during conversations with a customer or a supplier, because most employees only see their leader during virtual meetings. The impact of exemplary behavior is much less. For leaders, it is therefore advisable to at least think carefully about the moments when you are visible. What do you show them? Which themes do you make important? Especially in these times, it is essential to be aware of that. For companies and organizations that are not thinking about how they will exactly organize hybrid working, it is advisable to take these types of ethical considerations into account. Gamification can be a good means to load the core values of the organization and to playfully encourage employees to adopt the desired behavior appropriate to this new situation. It can also be advisable to consciously build in room for reflection. During, for instance, a virtual team meeting, how did we work together in the past period? What dilemmas were involved, and how could the team resolve such a dilemma differently next time? By paying structural attention to reflection, the threshold for colleagues to raise ethical dilemmas and to address others on these dilemmas becomes lower. As a leader, do not forget to hand out compliments for things that went well. Did sales and customer satisfaction go up? Be sure to let your team know. All the more reason for an organization to think carefully about how it organizes its work. Not just in a physical sense, but also in terms of cooperation and ethics. You can make an overview of this in your workbook. We also need to know clearly what is expected of us by setting clear objectives. A good approach to engaging your team is to translate the strategic vision into concrete objectives that the individual and the team can relate to. People need to understand why what they do is important, what they contribute, what their added value is, so that they feel involved and take ownership. This is also how we build company culture. Change has become a constant in our daily work. Now, as a leader, you need to stimulate the change mindset of your employees if you want your company to remain competitive and future-proof. The focus used to be on IQ, intelligence, and EQ, emotional intelligence. But now there is an additional factor, AQ, or adaptability intelligence. How quickly can someone reorient himself? How solution-oriented and flexible is he? How easily does he adapt to a new environment, to new circumstances? How does his view continuously change? As a leader, you need to stimulate this mindset, for example, by involving people in decision-making, by constantly putting learning, growth, and continuous improvement on the agenda, by stimulating creative thinking in terms of renewal, but by not accepting a standstill, by actively looking for new ways of working, by questioning everything, by initiating feedback loops, by rotating tasks, responsibilities, roles, and domains. This way, continuous adjustment becomes the new norm. This is how you constantly challenge your people. In time, this will also create a culture of change in the company. So pay attention to what you expect and what you have to give. If you expect flexibility, you must also give it. And don't forget that culture is the sum of everyone's daily behavior. So be an example. The importance of ownership increases even further at a distance. If as a leader, you can be sure that employees take their tasks seriously, you will have less work to do in remote management. But even if your team has not shown ownership recently, it is also important to start working on it in a remote setting. But it is certainly not easier. So start as small as possible by setting a short-term goal. For example, make sure you have a goal for a week from now. Express your confidence in it and share the small successes. Be ready and have virtual conversations. Yes, it is a lot harder than physical conversations, but if your team isn't taking ownership now, you will have to. A few useful questions for leaders to ask themselves during this process. Which people do you usually choose? Are there people you unconsciously pay less attention to? In other words, do you assign new tasks to people you know rather than to those who best meet the criteria for a particular task or project? When employees themselves have influence on the way they work and can help determine how the objectives are realized, this leads to greater involvement and motivation. Research by the American consultancy and research firm Gallup shows that teams with a high-level involvement are 22% more productive, have an employee turnover that is 65% lower, and make 41% fewer mistakes. Leadership is giving direction. If there is no direction, people do not know what they need to show ownership for, and everyone will fill in the details when he is judged for mistakes. As soon as people start working on their own, mistakes will be made. So anticipate this, accept this, embrace this. As a leader, it's up to you to accept that this will happen and to keep your eyes open to see the lessons to be learned. Because that is also ownership, acknowledging your mistakes and seeing what can be improved. By creating a culture where people acknowledge their own mistakes, people are more likely to get up and take on new tasks without worrying about whether a mistake could hurt their careers. Note that giving direction is not about telling how something should be done or giving orders or telling how something should be done. It is about where we want to be within X time, setting a flag as it were, result expectation, and why. I noticed that many leaders struggle with this in leadership coaching. If you explain to your people how something should be done, all autonomy is lost, and that is an important competence for remote workers. Those who experience more autonomy, which is about being able to make your own choices, are more involved and more willing to develop themselves further. An autonomous employee wants to gain the right experience and develop competencies to become even better at his job. Autonomy can be given by allowing your employee to plan their own time, to choose which tasks they perform first and how, and with whom they work. Freedom to decide for themselves. We sometimes get lured into a trap by employees who want us to tell them how to achieve their goals. Now limit yourself to explaining what we want to achieve and especially why, so that with every action, employees ask themselves whether this action contributes to achieving the set goals. They should be able to make this assessment themselves. Employees should feel motivated to go for these goals. Once you've indicated the direction you want to go, the trick is to get people to commit to that goal. Make sure people want to work towards this goal. Shared successes, best practices, lessons learned, progress. Everyone wants to be part of a winning team. If they see that many things are going well, that we are constantly learning, and that you are confident as a leader, they will automatically come up with contributions. Set objectives. Goals also facilitate the decision-making process. You can refer back to the goals for each choice. Which choice fits better with our goals? Does what we do today fit into our short and long-term goals? Does this choice helps us get closer to our goal, or does it deviate from it? In this way, employees themselves are able to make and dare to make decisions. As a leader, you can also steer on weekly short-term goals, target setting, motivating your employees to achieve them and giving them a clear sense of what is expected. This way, you ensure focus and priorities. Of course, there will be many other things the employee will do that week, but we have an agreement, a commitment on the important tasks. Employees and leaders have expectations of each other. In normal circumstances, these are quickly expressed through questions, emails back and forth, and formal and informal conversations in the office. It is worth looking at whether these can be formalized. Probably not only the way of working has changed, but also the processes, activities, deadlines, market expectations, etc. Therefore, it may be useful to translate long-term goals into short-term objectives. What goals do we set? By what deadlines are we setting these goals? What do we want to achieve by the end of the month? And where do we want to be at the end of this week and at the end of next week? What do you need to achieve next? Because we work remotely, those concrete short-term goals are a clear framework within which to work. They help employees to orientate themselves and to do the right things and make the right decisions. Do we know what everyone is doing every minute of the day? No, we don't. Nor do we have to, but we have an idea of what the end result of that week might be. We can have conversations about the workload that someone is taking on, too much or too little. We can shift our own priorities to help someone else who is overwhelmed with work. The value of co-creating goals. Setting goals for yourself can be a daunting task the first time. Is no one telling me what to do? How do I know what to work on? That's why it is your job as a leader to facilitate the process of creating goals. There are 3 levels you can go through. You can set the objectives for your team yourself. This is the basic level. There is clarity, but the team has little say in the achievability of those goals. No responsibility, no accountability. Or you can co-create objectives with the team. This is a good place to be. You have conversations together about what the objectives might be, and you agree on them. Shared responsibility, shared accountability. Or the team creates the objectives. The best place to be. You've set the North Star and the team can set their own goals, full responsibility and full accountability. So what is my responsibility as a leader then? You make sure the team has everything they need to do their job. You make yourself available for any help they may need. You may look outside the team to internal, external customers rather than inside the team or to the team. Start by setting a good example. Be transparent about the goals you are trying to achieve each week and report and document them clearly. They serve as a starting point for setting individual goals. Have conversations about those goals and discuss how you can achieve them together. Be very clear in your expectations of the cooperation and at the same time be open to feedback. This is a team effort. So in this video, we looked at the vision, which is more important than ever. How do you build a remote corporate culture to emphasize values and ethics, give direction? And this is the first part of the output-oriented leadership. Your workbook will help you to get started with these first steps. So take the time to work on this. Success lies here. Don't rush to the next video. Let this sink in. Do your reflection. Start applying it in your teams. I also invite you to watch the interview with Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon, for inspiration.